All right, welcome connectingdirectors.com readers. Super psyched today because we are going to be talking with Cindy Gallop, who is going to be one of the keynote speakers this year at the ICCFA convention. Welcome to Connecting Directors, Cindy.
Delighted to be here, Ryan.
So, look, you and I have had just a brief conversation before this interview about how you're a very unconventional speaker to have at a funeral convention. So, when ICCFA reached out to you to talk at a convention directed towards funeral professionals, what was your initial reaction?
I was absolutely delighted to be invited to speak at the ICCFA, and in fact, having looked at the agenda and also, by the way, having read a lot of the content in Connecting Directors, I'm even more excited. And I'm excited for a couple of reasons, Ryan. The first is that I consult and I speak to a whole range of different sectors, and I do find that the same business dynamics tend to play out in all of them in terms of the need to really reinvent the way the business moves forward in order to capitalize on the future and, quite frankly, to make an absolute ton of money. So that's where I come from. And even in my very early acquaintance with the funeral business, I'm seeing a lot of opportunities there that I'm looking forward to talking about. And, the thing about coming from the outside is that sometimes, you can shine a fresh light on things that when you live them day to day may be less obvious. And so I'm hoping that, some of the things I say will just spark a different way of thinking about the business that might prove very productive and profitable. The other reason I was excited was that I live my own business philosophies, and they manifest in my two startups, If We Ran the World, which is my attempt to redesign the future of business, and Make Love Not Porn, which is my attempt to redesign the future of sex. And by the way, those two things are much more inextricably entwined than people might think, and I'll talk a bit about that. But what is very interesting is that, so several years ago, I spoke at a conference where a woman came up to me subsequently, and she was a hospice worker. And she said to me, you and I have the same issue. We both work in two areas that nobody ever wants to talk about, sex and death. And actually, that was what first got me thinking about the area and the profession of death, if you like. And so I am very, very well acquainted with, through my work with Make Love Not Porn, with a topic that is a fundamental fact of human life that nobody wants to talk about and address directly for many, many sociocultural reasons. And I'm really, really interested in the funeral profession for the same reason. Because just as I see many huge business opportunities in what we're doing with Make Love Not Porn to open up the discussion around sex in the real world, there are many opportunities to open up the discussion around death and to actually begin the process of engaging with the business much further upstream than I think happens a lot within the profession currently. And I say that also because one of the things I do as an entrepreneur and as an advisor and a consultant is I engage with a lot of other entrepreneurs and businesses that have seen new opportunities. And within the millennial audience, I know a number of young men and women who are starting businesses that are to do with aspects of death. So two young millennial women started a venture called Loss. And they did it because both of them had lost people very close to them. And they realized that within the millennial audience, nobody understood how to engage with grief. And so Modern Loss is a millennial take on how you deal with loss when you are in your 20s, and how you help and comfort and organize, with millennials around that. I have another young female entrepreneur friend whose mother passed away with cancer, which made her realize that there is a real lack of both a support system and particularly a financial support system. And so she has a venture that is essentially about crowdfunding that helps get people through very difficult situations and the death of a loved one. And all of these people are bringing a very fresh, modern lens to the business of death. And so I think there are very interesting opportunities to be identified that are actively helpful in a way that again is true of my fundamental belief that the future of business is doing good and making money simultaneously. And I think there's a huge opportunity to do that in the funeral profession. I'm looking forward to talking about that in detail at ICCFA.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, right? And I think the thing that hits me the strongest is the opportunity to reinvent the funeral profession and reinvent the way we handle death. So, from an outside perspective, when you started looking at the death care profession in the funeral industry, what were some of the things you immediately saw that need reinventing?
Well, Ran, I would absolutely emphasize for your audience that I'm coming from the outside. I have absolutely no in-depth knowledge of your profession. But I think that, and again, bear in mind that I am absolutely all about doing good and making money simultaneously. I want to live in a business world where the more good you do, the more money you make, and the more money you make, the more good you do. And I emphasize that because at the moment, the way most companies do this is that they tend to kind of separate out the two. They go, oh, we make money here, and then we do good by writing checks to clear our conscience over here. And actually, I believe the future is about integrating social responsibility into the way you do business that makes it a key driver of future growth and profitability. I think the funeral profession has a huge opportunity to do that, because if we were all able to adopt a more open, healthy attitude towards death, towards the fact that it comes to us all and it comes expectedly and unexpectedly, and to some extent it's never expected, when you love somebody, then there are business opportunities, as I said, to engage with this area much further upstream than I observe the profession doing currently, but in a way that will enormously help people, because it will ease that moment when it comes. It will help at a very practical level, because we all know that people done unprepared is the worst thing that you can do to your loved ones. It puts a massive strain around the whole process. Not knowing, what your loved ones' intentions are, as much to do with their own funeral and the celebration and ceremony around that, as much as practical things like wills and what they want done with their estate, etc. And I think you open up that conversation a great deal earlier to actually make planning for it. I use this word very loosely, but actively fun and engaging, and to actually create a much healthier environment around it that means that when the time comes, it's a much happier process for everybody insofar as it can be. And so I think that there is a very interesting opportunity for the funeral profession to operate what I call the business model of the future, which is shared values plus shared action equals shared profit. Financial profit and social profit, by which I mean when brands and businesses come together with their audiences, their consumers, on the basis of values that you all share, which, by the way, is the most fundamental requirement for a good relationship in life as much as business. If you don't share the same values, you will never really connect. When you are then enabled to co-act collaboratively and collectively on those values, you can make things happen in the real world that benefit consumers, benefit society, and benefit the brand and its business. And in a way, I would say the funeral profession is the ultimate values-based business in a way that I don't see it necessarily actively operating. And what I mean by that is, and again, I relate this to the conversations we have around Make Love Not Porn. One of the things I'm often asking people is, what are your sexual values? Because we don't want to talk about sex, we are never brought up to think about those. Our parents, if we're lucky, many of us are born into families, environments where our parents bring us up to have good manners, a work ethic, a sense of responsibility, accountability. Nobody ever brings us up to behave well in bed. And they should, because generosity, sensitivity, empathy, kindness are as important there as they are in other areas of our lives and work where we are actively taught to exercise those values. The same applies to death and passing and grief. We are never asked or taught to think about what our values are around inevitably emotionally upsetting areas of our lives. And what that means is that people very unfortunately find themselves speechless and actionless when it comes to the issue of death. You literally don't know what to do, you don't know what to say. And, I see this, in my own daily life as much as my friends all the time, particularly at a time when, everybody seems to. What social media demonstrates in a more connected world is that when people are dealing with terminal illness or death, you find out about it a whole lot more quickly, and you find out about it with people that you have greater or lesser degrees of connectivity with, and you literally don't know what to say. There's the form language. My sincerest condolences. Sorry for your loss. And that's meaningless. We need a whole new language around death. One of the things I talk about from a marketing communications perspective is that one of the quickest ways to think differently about something is to change the language around it. And I'll be talking about that, by the way, at the ICCFA. So when the funeral profession creates that language, you give people a real values-based gift because you give them a better way to connect with each other and to articulate what they're feeling. When you open up the dialogue around death in a healthier way, you help people by creating a better environment in which to make decisions, talk to people, connect with people, that there are so many social benefits that add up to really good business for the funeral profession. And I want to talk about that in a lot of detail at ICCFA. Does all of that make sense, by the way?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and it's fascinating. I love the tie-in, and you're exactly right about the value system in the funeral profession. So I'm super excited to hear you speak, and I think that you bring a very just non-traditional approach to it. And I think a lot of times that's the best approach because in the profession we get used to the stereotypes and we get used to thinking inside a box, and certain things can't be said and done because we've never said and done them before. And bringing that kind of perspective from the outside and shaking things up is exactly what our profession needs. So I'm excited to hear that. Kind of winding down, in your Twitter profile, one of the things that caught my eyes is you were the Michael Bay of business. And I don't know if our audience knows who Michael Bay is specifically, so if you could let us know who Michael Bay is and then tell us why you're the Michael Bay of business, I think that'd be a great closing.
Sure. So Michael Bay is a Hollywood movie director who is famous for blowing things up. He directed The Island. He's directed a whole host of blockbuster movies that feature vast amounts of explosions. And so I sum up my consultancy, my business speaking approach as I like to blow shit up. I am the Michael Bay of business. And I do that entirely deliberately, Ryan, because that's not just a bit of creativity, a bit of fun, a bit of whimsy. I do it because I'm a big believer in be your own filter. When I characterize what I do in that way, it attracts to me the clients who want what I do and it repels the ones who don't. And I sure as hell want to repel the ones who don't, because that's a waste of everybody's time, money, and effort. So when I talk about be your own filter, this is advice I give to every business and every person. Find a way to represent what you do in a highly memorable, vivid soundbite that will attract to you the customers, the clients who respond to that, and will actually filter out the ones who don't. Because that way, you are doing business with the people who really value what you do, and very importantly and very practically, will pay that value, versus the ones who don't really get it and won't see the value you represent. And so, as I say, I recommend to everybody, be your own filter. And again, I'll talk a bit more about how you might do that in the funeral profession, at ICCFA.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Cindy, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do a quick call and interview with us. Looking forward to meeting you in San Antonio. Just thank you so much for your time.
Total pleasure.